Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the hidden grand engine that literally powers everything around us. I'm talking about macroeconomics. Now hold on, I know what you might be thinking. Economics? That sounds like a bunch of dry charts, distant theories, and folks in suits throwing around words like aggregate. But honestly, the truth is that macroeconomics is this invisible, powerful force shaping your daily life, your career choices, and yes, even what you pay for your morning coffee.
So let's just dive right in. Think about your next trip to the supermarket. When you grab a loaf of bread or a carton of milk, you're actually doing way more than just running an errand. You are actively participating in a massive interconnected web of labor, production, and capital. Today, we're going to see exactly how that seemingly small everyday action scales all the way up to become the giant national economic metrics you hear about on the evening news.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. Measuring the economy's health, 2. How money flows around, 3. Inflation, unemployment, and recessions, 4. The government's policy toolkit, 5. Riding the business cycle, and 6. India's macroeconomic challenges.
All right, let's start with Section 1, Measuring the Economy's Health.
Okay, before we get into the heavy hitters like GDP, what even is macroeconomics? Well, think of your personal household budget as a single tree. That's microeconomics. Macroeconomics, on the other hand, is the entire forest. It doesn't just zoom in on one single consumer or one specific business. Instead, it looks at aggregate measures, meaning the grand totals of national income, overall employment rates, and these large-scale economic phenomena that just sweep across an entire country.
Now, when we calculate gross domestic product, which is basically the ultimate scorecard for that economic forest we just talked about, we have a major trap we have to avoid: double counting. Think about building a car. We definitely don't want to count the value of the raw steel, and then the value of the rubber tires, and then add the full value of the finished car on top of all that, right? That would be totally skewed. So the production approach solves this by only looking at the value added at each step of production. This gives us the final car's true added value to the economy.
But there's another way to measure GDP, and it's by looking at spending. And this is where you come in. That grocery bill from earlier, that's consumption. A local bakery buying a fancy new commercial oven, that's investment. Those highway repairs causing traffic in your town right now, government spending. And the whole web of global trade, that's net exports. Every single one of these things literally adds up together to create the nation's GDP. Every time you make a purchase, you're officially adding a drop to the bucket of your country's economic scorecard.
Which brings us to a trap we pretty much all fall into: the illusion of money. Imagine your boss pulls you aside and gives you a 5% raise. Sounds fantastic, doesn't it? But what if the cost of your rent and your groceries went up by 10% that exact same year? Your real purchasing power actually just went down. Well, the exact same thing happens to entire countries. Nominal GDP looks at current prices, which might just be inflated. To find out what's really going on, we have to look at real GDP, which adjusts for those price changes to show us the true inflation-adjusted growth of an economy.
And when we put this out there on the global stage, the numbers are just staggering. Sure, the US and China dominate in sheer size if you're only looking at nominal GDP. But take a look at India. With an incredibly impressive 7.7% projected real growth rate for 2025 to 2026, it is expanding its actual real-world productive capacity at a blistering pace, honestly far outpacing the growth rates of a lot of developed nations.
Moving right along to Section 2, How Money Flows Around.
Picture a totally average Tuesday. You put your hours in at your job, providing your labor to a firm. And in return, bam, you receive your income, your paycheck. You take that money, you buy goods and services from other businesses. Any money you don't spend, well, hopefully you save it in a bank, which then turns around and lends it out to companies so they can invest in new factories or software. And of course, the government steps in, collects taxes, and provides public services. This whole process is called the circular flow of income. It's essentially a massive, continuously beating heart that keeps the economy alive and moving.
All right, Section 3, Inflation, Unemployment, and Recessions.
So, ever wonder why your favorite takeout order is suddenly way more expensive? It usually boils down to one of two things. Demand-pull inflation is what happens when everyone suddenly has cash and wants to buy things, like a massive rush for concert tickets, but there's a limited supply, so sellers bump up the prices. Cost-push inflation, on the other hand, is when the raw materials, like the fuel for the delivery truck or the wheat for your noodles, simply cost the restaurant more. And what do? They pass those higher costs right on to you.
Now, just like inflation, unemployment isn't a one-size-fits-all metric. Sometimes it's what we call frictional, like when you've just graduated and you're hunting for that first real gig. That's a completely normal, healthy part of a career journey. But that is very different from cyclical job losses. Those are caused by a broader economic recession, where demand for goods drops and companies are literally forced to do layoffs. Or structural unemployment, where an entire industry shifts technologically and the skills that veteran workers have are just no longer needed.
Next up, Section 4, the government's policy toolkit.
Think of the government like the mechanic for all of this, holding the dial to a giant national thermostat. If we're stuck in a recession and unemployment is high, the government uses expansionary fiscal policy. Basically, they turn the heat up. They lower taxes so you have more money in your pocket to spend, and they increase government spending on things like infrastructure to create jobs. But if inflation gets totally out of control and prices are rising way too fast, they flip it and use contractionary fiscal policy. They cool things down by raising taxes or cutting spending to slow down the flow of money.
Section 5, riding the business cycle.
Every single economy breathes in and out through these 4 phases: expansion, peak, contraction, and trough. We grow, we hit a maximum point where inflation gets too hot, we contract into a recession, and then we hit the bottom before recovering all over again. Knowing where we stand in this breathing cycle is so incredibly practical. It helps you plan for your next major life purchase. I mean, you probably want to hold off on buying a house at the absolute peak when prices and interest rates are sky high, right? Instead, you'd look for opportunities when the economy is in a recovery or expansion phase.
And finally, Section 6, India's macroeconomic challenges.
Let's bring this into the real world. Behind India's impressive growth numbers lies a really staggering reality. Despite massive overall economic expansion, the top 10% of India's adult population captures 57.7% of the total income. This is a glaring reminder that a high national GDP growth rate absolutely does not automatically mean the wealth is being distributed evenly across all those households in that circular flow we looked at earlier.
But, inequality is just one piece of the puzzle here. Imagine trying to plan your entire year when your livelihood depends entirely on unpredictable monsoon rains. That is the daily reality for India's massive agricultural sector. On top of that, there's a huge prevalence of jobs in the informal sector that lack security, a fiscal deficit driven by necessary subsidies, and a really urgent need to upgrade infrastructure to keep up with growth. These aren't just textbook terms. These are daily realities driving massive government actions today, like the Gati Shakti initiative, which is aiming to plug those exact infrastructure gaps.
So why does all this matter to you? Because this stuff isn't just for academics sitting in ivory towers. The businesses right in your own town use these exact macroeconomic metrics every single day. If they see inflation rising, they might adjust the prices of the products you buy. If they see a recession looming in the business cycle, they might pause their hiring. This data directly dictates whether a company is going to hire you, give you that raise, or expand their operations into your neighborhood.
So the next time you're scanning prices at the supermarket or you're hearing about interest rate hikes on the news, remember, you are not just a spectator here. You are actively inside the machine. So based on the current macroeconomic indicators, how are you going to use this knowledge to navigate your own future and make smarter financial moves? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.